I was probably 38 when I found my birth mother, and she had just died a year and a half before.
Oh, damn.
I lost my shit. Even in my 20s, like early 20s, that was happening throughout my life. People like, I feel like I can talk to you. I didn't know an empath was a thing until much later on. And that's where it can become overwhelming because let's say you go to the grocery store and you're a super duper empath. You're like, the fruit's talking to me. There's so much going on of people's energy that's in there that you may be picking up on.
Have you jumped out of a plane?
Yes.
Of course you have.
Against my free will. I have a huge fear of heights.
The big silence, empowering personal experiences, inspiring compassion, and healing lives. We are no longer silent. We are here.
The Big Silence. The Big Silence.
Kate Hobbs, welcome to the Big Silence podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I am excited to be in Texas.
Yeah, escaped the catastrophic atmospheric storm hitting the coast.
Yes.
And it's actually sunny here in Texas. So, Kate, you're a New Yorker, now in LA.
Yes.
Intuitive empath, certified energy healer, and consultant, and you're passionate about helping people release blocks and overcome obstacles. Now, that path came from somewhere. Can we talk about Kate growing up?
Absolutely. I don't even know where to begin, but we can just say I was adopted at
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's like, how old? Do you remember? I was adopted at birth. And when I traced it back, it was like they knew I was being adopted. So I went home with this family, my family, at 6 days old. And I always had been told growing up that I have just so much energy and different energy, and you don't look like who your parents. And my parents were incredibly loving, but coming with different energy into that space, for me, this is my perspective, was just constantly being told how different and how much energy I have. It was a very academic family. My sister's a big reader, and I just was like, let's go outside, and very animal friendly, loving family. But I always was picking up on other things and didn't realize that everyone else wasn't picking up as much in that capacity. It's not a judgment. It was just like, I see that over there, or, just
Yeah.
things like that. So it came from the silence of that a bit and not really feeling like I fit in that capacity. And then I was adopted because my parents had a disabled son who had to be in a caring facility. And then there was me.
So, your adopted family, you didn't know until what age that you were adopted?
I knew my whole life.
Oh, you
There's
did?
not a
Okay.
time I
Okay.
could remember that I was like never knew.
When you were able to understand that they had that conversation.
At
So you
least at
learned
6, I knew.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
for sure. My
it
whole
was
life.
never like a big shocker or
No.
yeah.
I get asked this question a lot,
Yeah.
being adopted, like, would you tell, would you not? I am a blanket 100%, I think you should automatically tell. And people ask me this, and I said, because as a knowing person that I am, I've always been curious. And they even tried to help me find my birth parents, which were, when I was born, it was sealed in New York.
Mhm.
But I've found them. But
So what age were you when you found them, and how was that?
my adopted family, which is my family, had already passed away. I found, yeah. So I had been trying for a really, really long time, and court records were sealed, and it was just like this exhausted process. And then, welcome to the internet. Things started to change, but
Mhm.
my parents had already passed away. And so I was dealing with that whole,
So your adopted
yeah,
family had
mhm,
passed away.
who I call my parents.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And they had already passed away. And then a friend of mine said, hey, try this woman. She's fantastic.
Mhm.
And he had given it to me multiple times, and I was just so busy with dealing with the like state executor, just which is where I say, don't let things be distracting to you. So I'm trying to think, I was probably 38 when I found my birth mother, and she had just died a year and a half before.
Oh, damn.
I lost my shit.
Ugh.
Like, I think I cried for 48 hours straight, and I had to get on a plane and I had an appointment to check on some of this energy work with Judith Orloff in California. I will never forget it. I cried all the way from Colorado to California on the plane with sunglasses on, trying to resurrect myself of like, "Oh my gosh, I missed this by" it was like, I don't know, 13 months or something.
Wow, and what about your birth father?
I've met him, he is
Uh-huh.
alive, and
Yeah.
he knew nothing about me that I even existed. He has no children, never
Oh, so
been
they
ma
weren't together. No.
No.
Oh my god.
So, I was a complete shocker when she when she reached out to find him, which was a couple years later,
Yeah.
um, and he was like, "What?" So, I've met him, and I've met his brother and sister and his niece and his 2 nieces.
Yeah. So do you have somewhat of a relationship with him now or good?
Yeah, I mean, we check in through text. He's actually on the East Coast near where I was born.
Yeah.
So he's been there and his sister lives in and brother live in Lake Tahoe. So I went out and visited them.
Yeah.
They couldn't be friendlier. This is not your like, "We don't wanna hear from you." This was like, "Hi, I can't wait to meet you," and open
Wow.
arms, like everybody will tell you as an adopted person, like what I've heard is like, "Are you sure you wanna know? Are you sure you wanna know? Well, what if this? What if that?" Well, okay, thanks for your information, but I can handle I am who I am
Yeah.
and wherever that takes me. And I think it's an individual choice.
Yeah. I would definitely Bobby and I don't have children, but, and we've made that choice now. But if we were ever to adopt, I would definitely wanna have that open conversation.
Yeah.
Nothing should be hidden. But, okay, so your parents,
Mhm.
we talked before, and you mentioned that the household growing up, there was depression,
Mhm.
anxiety, addiction.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I when I look back on it, obviously, you've got the big view of looking back when I could feel, like, the sadness, and if you look at the circumstances to where I was adopted into, a child with a disability that can't see, can't speak,
Mhm.
should have lived only 4 years, who is still alive
Mhm.
today and being taken out of the home, and nothing was really talked about, like, it wasn't really like, I remember seeing him a few times, but it was just, this is someone who's very disabled,
Yeah.
who and just that kind of, like, swept under the rug caused, I fully believe, depression. My father was, a very generous person, and I say this to people who are very generous, just be aware of who you're being generous with because
Mm.
there can always be a mini backlash in that.
Wait, can you,
Just like,
tell more about that?
my dad was always like he did really well and made a lot of his own money from
Yeah,
scratch, and I think he just wanted to share it, and when people get wind of that, it
I understand that.
so you understand,
Yeah,
it's kind of my feeling of where I can feel who is
yeah.
really there for the right reason and just being generous and believed. My parents were very giving in education scholarships, just similar to what you're saying about getting therapy and just
Mhm.
that not everybody is created equal in that space of just everybody deserves an education. So scholarships were put out anyway in that space. So he worked a lot and my mom started drinking and it was like hidden piece
Mhm.
of to cope and just the sadness and someone who's a feeler.
Right.
I can feel it. Like I can tell if somebody has been drinking when they pick up the phone and I'm 1,000 miles away with
Yeah.
one sip of alcohol. Like I am just, and it's not just from that, it's part of the intuitive empath skills. Like I can feel it.
Right. So you're an empath, and we'll go into exactly what an empath is for those who are listening don't know. But you had this intuition as a kid. Let's go into that. And you started to touch on it earlier a little.
Yeah. I think, and now I'm tracing it back of like when was like my real first hit. I call it like a psychic hit. I
Yeah.
remember we grew up riding horses in rural Massachusetts on the weekends, and my sister was a huge horse fanatic, still is. And I saw somebody that was working at the stable, and I just got this message in my head. I'm thinking I was about 7.
Yeah.
I'm like, she's pregnant. And this is someone who's 16. And I'm like, of course, I don't say anything because
Mhm.
why would Kate know that? And I kept it to myself. And then a month later, it comes out that she's pregnant and is keeping the baby. And I thought to like, so this has just been this whole messaging system. And for me, everybody gets messages in different ways. For me, it'll drop in like an actual thought.
Yeah.
So it took me took me a while to figure out, like, I just used to get mad that people weren't paying attention.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that it was an added bonus of messaging because it drops in like a thought. Like all of a sudden I'll just be like, "Oh, well, Karena, blah, blah, blah." And you're just like, "Wow, why are you talking about that? Because that just happened." That's how it comes to me a lot, and a physical and at the same time, physical
So,
feeling.
how do you then trust your intuition and trust what you're like, did you go through a phase where like, no, like that's I don't believe
100%. I was
myself?
like, "Nope, nope, I'm gonna turn it off. This isn't right. I don't wanna hear that."
Yeah.
Because there's always this misnomer of like, "Oh, wow, you can just, go to Vegas and do this." Yeah, you can get
Can you
messages on yeah, I've
what
done
numbers have you
yeah,
ever
I've
gone to
done
Vegas and gambled and won?
I have to a certain degree, but I believe for me, it works better if I'm sitting with you and helping you
Yeah.
than me directly in that
Mhm.
space, but there was parts where I wanted to turn it off because I would get messages from my own self, and I'm like, "I don't wanna wait a year," like, and I would
Yeah.
wanna speed things up because it gives you a messaging of, like, "You need to deal with this before this." And so that's something where I was like, "Am I just being creative?" Like, I didn't really figure out the complete way it was coming in until really during acting school, like, my second round of that, because it was so impactful when they were asking me, "How do you come up with this?" And I just thought, like, "What are you talking about? You walk home, and doesn't it fly at you when you walk by people?" And I remember my friend looking at me and being like, "I don't know what the fuck you're talking about." I put on my headphones and I walk home. And I was like, of course, in my head, I'm like, "She's obviously just not paying attention."
Hmm. So, intuition, presence, like what is the different of just paying attention? Can anyone have this superpower or is it
So
like
I believe everybody's got intuition, a
yeah,
gut in like
yeah.
everybody talks about the gut instinct, and you can train it just like any other tool of like and the way I feel is cool to train it is like you're like, "I need to call Bobby right now."
Mhm.
And then because you got a message like out of nowhere, you're like, "I'm gonna do that." And then you can ask him, was he thinking about you? Like you can do
Right.
this back and forth kind of energetic frequency connection with people that you know, but also just watching the pattern of, did that come true? Did I manifest that? Did that happen that way? There's kind of a piece where it's like, did I get a psychic hit? Did I manifest that?
Mhm.
There's that combination, but I believe everybody's got that gut instinct. I mean, it's just innately there
Yeah.
of like, don't walk down that street.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then I look at it like any other skill set. Maybe some people, I know that people are born with a higher level of it. And then there's people that not only can get the intuition, but can feel the other person's physicality and feel what's going on in them.
Yeah.
So that's where people can get exhausted if they're not knowing that they're picking up not only on your energy, Bobby's energy, like all of it, and maybe you're just having a bad day. It's not on purpose. And that's why for me, the cutting the cords and shielding is important for people to know if they don't recognize that's what's happening.
Yeah. Explain cutting cords.
So I
Yeah.
I I gave away 6 healings online for PTSD Day, and
Mhm.
I met this woman randomly, but not, who came to me, and she was telling me that she was getting sick at work, getting sick where she was going, and it turns out she's an uber super powerful empath and was picking up on
Mhm.
everybody's stuff, like violently, like throwing up.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
I talked to her. There's a lot of ways to cut cords, and energetically you can just say, I want to cut cords. And I imagine blades coming down.
Mhm.
I also have done it where I pull in like myself in a triangle and pull in a lot of like hot sunlight to burn off anything that is not me.
Yeah.
And I believe that that is where I call it energetic dust that you've picked up. And it's not nefarious always. People are always like, oh, they're attached to me. Yes, it's just like walking through a room. You're going to pick up on things, just
Mhm.
like dust on a table. But that's how I cut cords a lot of the time. And grounding will help in that piece.
Mhm.
And everybody feels like I thought this at one point. I didn't want to leave this relationship I was in, And I was super attached in the cord piece because we had a really deep connection. And everybody's like, well, you shouldn't be attached to somebody in that capacity, even if you're in a loving relationship. So the misnomer is, in my opinion, you can be in a fantastic relationship without them cord attached to you because let's say Bobby goes somewhere
Mhm.
and he's around this toxic person, you don't want to feel it.
Yeah. Right.
It doesn't mean you're not connected. Like that's just not true.
Yeah. Let's talk about being an empath and what are the signs of that?
Okay.
Because I've been told I'm an empath because sometimes people are I'll be on a phone call with someone and then I'll call them afterwards and I said, I felt you felt this way on that phone call because of what this person said. They're like, yes. Like you just
The
being,
energy reading.
yeah.
Yeah. That's a perfect example that you can feel people's emotions that are around you, not just from and being on the phone, not just from the physical cues,
Yeah.
but also just like I've been working with people and I can be like, all of a sudden I'll get like I got a shooting pain on a call. I was working with a man on
Mhm.
Zoom. And I said to him, I'm like, did you hurt your shoulder? And he's like, yes.
Mhm.
He's like, I was at the gym this morning and I jacked my left shoulder and it was my left shoulder and mirror in the Zoom. So that's a sign as the, you're
Yeah.
in the embodiment of the empath. There's multiple kinds of empaths, like plant empaths, animal empaths. Obviously, I believe that would be in your category too.
You're gonna meet the palms
I
later.
cannot wait to meet the palms and the kitty. So for me, in the multi
Yeah.
category of just because of how it's coming in. Like I can embody the energy of somebody else. Like I used to call it in acting like jumping skin. Like I can jump into the skin of that, which kind of sounds really gross. And we all know about the skinwalker, but just like there's a negative connotation. But to me, then you can be in somebody else's shoes. And I find that really, really helpful in assisting with that of like, yes, I haven't walked through what you've walked through,
Mhm.
but I can feel that emotion. Just like when we were talking about the guy in the airport, like that is an overwhelming
Mhm.
energy coming at me of just that deep, passionate love. And
Yeah.
I can feel the depth of that. So that's an empath category, but also just, you know, there's there's different like you can be one that can feel like what somebody else is tasting. You can get where that like if somebody's moved on and you can taste things that other people are tasting. There's just different
Wow.
pieces. So categories of that. Like I do this thing that I found out my other empath friends do is when there's a dead animal and it happened this morning on the side of the road, I automatically see them and I send them to the light. Like I talk to the dead animals on the side of the road. And now that I'm older, I'm talking to sometimes tires until I get closer and I've sent the tire to the light because it's just something we do. There's also a pattern that I've picked up on. If you take a song, and this is
Mhm.
my own findings in my friends, and you can repeat it like 30 times and not get sick of it, that is, I believe, a sign because I've run it through my tiny circle of empath friends of that is like a
Like, you wake up and you have something in your head, or you just have, like, a favorite song that you can always
or
sing
just
and
it's just one that you can just find a song on the radio and you're like, "Ooh, this frequency feels so good," and you could
yeah,
hit repeat 30 times and
yeah,
not be bored.
yeah.
I actually think it's
So
like
that's a sign.
it's whatever that energy frequency feels so good. But that to me is one of my empath signs. The other is just people around you feel good. Strangers walk up to you and tell you things that like most people wouldn't be telling their therapist.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a big one.
yeah. And that's what happened to you at the airport, right? Yeah,
That's another sign that
yeah.
for me, even in my 20s, like early 20s, that was happening throughout my life. People like, I feel like I can talk to you. It's the empathy piece. And
Mhm.
I just assumed I was empathetic. I didn't know an empath was a thing until much later on. I just was like, of course I have empathy.
Yeah, yeah.
So my characteristics are, on my own a little bit, but just that part of where you can relate to somebody and people feel they can tell you anything. And they just start talking, and then all of a sudden they catch themselves like, "I don't know why I said that to you."
But then do you take that in, and then what do you have to do
To get
to
it out in the
yeah.
clearing, I do a bunch of different things for the clearing, which is really important. It's one of the things I teach people when I work with them. Like, I would talk to you about, like, what are your specifics? Like, what are you feeling when you're around people? Are you feeling exhausted? Are you feeling just like this rush of overwhelm? Do you feel like something is on you that you need to get off. Each one of those is a little bit different,
Mhm.
but I tell people to do the cutting of the cords
Mhm.
in however they choose. It can be pulling in light into your body, imagining the swords, and grounding. Grounding is so important because here you are for like imagine someone else's whole energy that you've picked up on if you're
Mhm.
embodying it.
Mhm.
And that's where it can become overwhelming because let's say you go to the grocery store and you're a super duper empath. You're like, the fruit's talking to me. You kind of sound crazy. This person's talking to me. Like there's so much going on of people's energy that's in there that you may be picking up on.
That's like the airport for me. Once I get on a plane, I'm just like
Headphones.
headphones, and if I want, I put my little hoodie on, maybe my eye
Airports are
mask.
another big one.
Yeah, so much
So
energy.
then I would work with people in creating a specific, when I say shield, it could be a geometry, it could be a specific thing that you do, like a cloak, whatever your visual of what makes you feel protected and safe
Mhm.
is what I tell people in the public spaces. And each one is an individual. That's the piece where I'm not just like, it has to be this,
Yeah,
because it's kind of how I feel about meditation. You have to sit like this. No, I wasn't doing it.
yeah.
And I thought, well, I'm not doing it right. I'm not going to do it. And this is individualized 100%. That's my opinion. And it's really important because what works for you may not work for somebody else.
So I wanna go back to your 20s. You
Okay.
had the
My,
wild
my
20s.
wild
I
20s.
wanna talk about
My
I
wild.
had a wild phase, like teens to
Yeah, I had teens
22
to teens
teens to
teens to
early
let's
20s.
let's not lie about the teens. Like, the teens were definitely rocky as well. I mean, well, growing up in New York, you grew up pretty fast in New
Yeah.
York City, and so just, you'd get the call, like, "So and so's parents are out of town, let's
Oh,
go to
yeah.
this
House
place, the whole
party.
house party," they're like that kinda thing, and then I ended up going away. One of my good friends was going to boarding school, and I was like, "I have to go to boarding school. I gotta get out of here."
Mhm.
And so I ended up going to boarding school in New Hampshire, which was absolutely one of, I would say, life-saving moments in my
Really?
existence. This
I just
boarding school changed my life. I'm still friends with a lot of people from there. It was a very small, incredibly outdoorsy, open school.
yeah.
Like, everything was like that's where I learned about Outward Bound and, you know, like, just it was a game changer for me.
So, with your family and then the wild teens and 20s, and did you ever feel like you had, like, I don't know, anything, like, in depression or something you had to work through? Like, what made you go wild?
I think it was more of just like, can people pay attention? Like,
Yeah,
I mean, I barely drink now. Like, the big joke is, oh my God, Kate had a half a White Claw. Like,
yeah,
ooh, she's buzzed,
yeah,
which is really what it would be. I mean, I could drink a lot. Like, I lived in Aspen after college and I taught little kids skiing and like, I would just be out drinking and
yeah,
partying and just like out of control. I mean, I could not drink that much right now
yeah.
by any means, but I think it was more of like, pay attention. Are you guys seeing how out of control I am? When I look back,
Mhm,
not
mhm.
then. I was like, look at what I can get away with. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Everyone needs their wild days.
yeah, I mean, I was definitely like, I've always been a dancer. Like, I
Yeah.
used to think I was a stripper in a past life. Like,
Dang,
I
yeah.
mean, I know that sounds like, but I just used to say it. Like, we'd be in the clubs in, in Colorado, and I'd be like, this was my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I just picked up dancing again now recently as, like, movement, and Bobby laughs at me because he's like, "You're not a good dancer." I'm like, "I don't need to be a good dancer, it just
Doesn't
makes me
matter.
feel good."
Whatever you wanna do to move and move it out. Like, I was dancing in the hotel room this morning.
Amazing. I know, I've been talking a
We'll
lot
just
about that, just
we're gonna have to
move.
do, like, a little shake
Yeah,
afterwards or
yeah.
maybe, like, midway, but, like, I mean, I've got some go-to songs, and I think going through school and then, when my miniature version of my acting career was music would shift my emotion
Mhm.
immediately, and if it was
Yeah.
something sad, I would be playing this, and if it was something happy, I'd be this, and one of my absolute go-tos to shift, like, "Kate, this is not what's happening right now."
Uh-huh.
It doesn't mean disassociate from that emotion, it just means, like, "Let's shift this," is the Bee Gees "Staying Alive." Like,
I
1000
mean, you
fucking
can't be
percent.
sad when you're listening to
Like, I
that.
mean, you can just do the walk and it is we just may have to do that later, but it is so it's so positive and just it brings the energy through my whole body. And that's one of the pieces. And for me, I feel is not just cutting cords, you're pulling different energy in,
Yeah.
which is really important.
Yeah, music and energy is huge. Like, when my mom passed, Bobby would have to listen to Dermot Kennedy on repeat. Do you know Dermot, who that
No,
is?
I
Okay.
don't, but
When
it's
you
it
wanna
doesn't
cry.
sound sad. Just from when you're saying that, I got this like, uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Yeah, but I needed to cry.
But that's good, and,
Yeah,
like, that's the piece, and when I say shifting the energy doesn't mean don't feel what you're feeling,
yeah,
because that's the part where is to me, can be I don't wanna say dangerous, but it's not helpful if you're just like, "No, I'm not feeling that." That just only makes it longer. Let it come in, feel it, move it out versus, like, getting it caught somewhere in your physical body,
yeah.
and I'm convinced that where we walk and what we interact with gets trapped. I'm
Oh,
not a
yeah.
scientist. I don't have the proof. I'm going off of my own
Mhm.
personal
100%.
stuff getting trapped in my body
Yeah.
and can cause some serious. I look at it like think of a clogged drain. It'll be okay for a moment and won't rust, but leaving it for a long time, that clog will wipe out the pipe.
Yeah.
And that's how I believe it goes through your body. And to me, I know that I've had some, catastrophic surgeries, and I believe it's from trapped energy. And if you are a big, big energy person, I
Mhm.
think it's even more important to get this through your body.
So let's talk about moving our body. So for me, coming out of my wild days and, becoming healthy again, I got into triathlon and endurance, and I know that's huge for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the triathlon
I'm not
person.
anymore,
Just
just so
just
you know.
just yeah, like, I'm not gonna be the one coming to save you in the water or anyone. I'm more like, I loved the endurance that took me completely out of my own way, which would be the backwoods stuff, obstacle courses, like I've worked with, some people, and they suggested this one called the Endurance Society in Vermont,
Mhm.
and they are fantastic, and it's like this completely off the grid event where you're through the woods and there's some kind of like scavenger hunt combination mixed in with it, and then there were some ones that I had done with some retired military, which were not for the faint of heart, but like that kind of stuff where you feel like, "Wow, I don't know what the hell I'm doing," makes me excited. I'm not the marathon runner when we talk endurance. Like, I'm more of like the backwoods,
You're more of
Knowles, Outward Bound.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done a triathlon in years. I tried to run in 2021 and train for like, I forget what it's called. It's like when you have 6 people on a team and you're in a bus or a
Yeah.
van for what is that called?
Oh,
Starts with an R.
yes, I know it. Relay race.
Yeah,
Is it?
Ragnar.
Oh, the Ragnar. Oh, wow.
But then thank goodness 2020 hit and they canceled it because I was training and I was like, "Ow, this hurts to, like,
Oh.
run anymore just on cement." So, but okay, your hat, I was like, "Wait, is that race?" It's Everesting.
Yes, the 29029, which is, Everesting, where you climb the equivalent elevation of Everest in, I think it's 36. You start at 6 AM on a Friday, and you end at 6 PM on a Saturday,
Yeah.
and you just loop the mountain. Like, you go up, you take the gondola down. You go up, you take the gondola down, and they do it in different mountains, and I have not completed it.
Right.
I've
Because that's why you have your black hat
That's why I
on.
have my black and not my red, but this year I'm going for my red. I'm always going for my red.
Can we talk about that? Because when a lot of times there's a lot of pressure on people if you
Uh,
sign up for a race and
yeah.
you don't finish or you don't get that time, but you're very positive about you're like I was asking about your hat before we started. You're like, "Yeah, I didn't finish it, but I'm gonna do it again." But you had a smile on your face.
Because to me, I'm always the person who's like, "Let's just try it anyway."
Yeah.
And to me, this is me against myself. And I'm going to have fun, make friends, community during these events versus like imagine if you're miserable the whole time. I'm not saying,
Yeah.
there's not moments where you're miserable because that's just part of any sort of endurance-ish.
Yeah.
But like I love the people that I've met. Like, I
Yeah.
am in touch with them frequently, and that's how much fun it is. To me, it's the journey on the way there, regardless if you get the hat.
Yeah.
There's people that did 1 lap. Okay, was it amazing? Did you meet people? Yeah. Okay, there you go. So, that's what I think holds some people back is this, like, and that, I mean, I believe is your ego. Like,
Mhm.
if I'm happy doing it and I only get, let's say there's 18 and I only get 10, great.
So
I'm going to be positive.
how far did you get on your last one?
So I'm trying to think. Jackson Hole, I feel like was 12
12
laps,
of
maybe.
18?
No,
Or
Jackson Hole is less. Gosh, I really can't remember, but I know that it was like over 11,000 feet I got. So it was like, I'd have to really look and I can
so
text you.
what was it that you knew, like, "I have to stop now and listen to yourself?"
So this one was definitely a straight up to me, I'm coming back off of like, let me go back a minute. I came up with like Hashimoto's, Lyme's disease, thyroiditis, all like right around COVID time. And it basically felt like it wiped my system out. Like I felt like I had mono for almost a year.
Wow.
And I had gained weight and I was just like, this is not me. I can't, like, I felt like I couldn't get off the couch. Like, it was incredibly, and finally, we're getting back in action in the last year of getting my energy back. But I was still pushing these things. But these events would definitely, I'd have a much longer recovery time. So now I'm much more aware of that. Like,
Mhm,
I think the part where for me, I'm not at war when I'm doing these events.
mhm.
Like, this is not where this is like, I'm gonna die out here if I don't keep going, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's my own personal body choice in that. So for me, if I'm like, "Okay, I don't wanna damage something," that's where I gauge for my own self. Everybody's gauge is different. I'm not telling anybody how to do it. They
Mhm.
can do whatever they want for their own, hike, event, whatever. That's how I gauge it. If I feel like I may injure something which will take me longer to recover, that's when I say, "Okay, I'm done."
So are you training different for the next one?
So this one is in September, and
Oh,
I'm starting to do more like the step ups, like longer walking, running combination and doing more squats, and that's starting to happen sooner. But usually I'm just kind of like, let's just see what happens when we get when we get closer to it, like 2 months out.
oh, I wanna see you send me a photo in your red hat.
I'm
But
gonna
if you
send you.
don't,
I'm
it's
gonna.
okay.
I'm going for the red hat. Like I always want that gold, and
Yeah.
and even if you get the red hat, I would still do it again. Like
Yeah.
this community is so cool. I mean, I don't get like, it's not like I get a kickback. Like they are such positive people, and I will tell you, if you don't get into that one, the Running Man. I don't know when they're doing it this year.
Mhm.
Is phenomenal. Like I told my friends, I'm like, we're going back because I did it by myself this year. And that's where I tell people, you can go to these events by yourself and leave with
Oh, yeah.
like,
I feel like those events are more social fitness, like triathlon's
yeah,
very solo,
yeah,
like
like serious. Like I'm like, I probably wouldn't fit in because I'd be like, oh my God, I can't swim. I mean, I can swim. I'm not gonna drown, but I'm not saving you.
No, it's not. I mean, there was a small community back when I used to do, but not really, and then it's such a solo race
Yeah.
and hours by yourself on a bike or a swim and then a run,
You'll have
and
some moments depending on which, if you chose this event to do,
yeah,
depending on the mountain, you're gonna be more alone or not as much. Like the
yeah,
Jackson Hole was a super tight mountain, so you were seeing people constantly. And
yeah.
so for me, I didn't wanna hike at night on that one just because it was harder
Mhm,
to see.
mhm.
But the other ones I've hiked at night and, you know
So you're just a badass, so I like talking about this. You've also done training with Navy SEALs and weapons training.
Yes.
How'd you get into that?
This may I've always loved guns. Like, just I think I've just always loved guns, and I grew up with an uncle who was very like, every gun is always loaded, very specific, and would
Mhm,
take me target shooting. And then I got into the Navy SEAL part of the shooting because I went into the endurance. I did some SEAL Fit 20X and different events with them, and started doing training when they were doing a weapons event. And then I got into another group called Spartan 7, where it was all Navy SEALs training you to shoot. And I just loved it. Like, I
yeah,
love target shooting. I'm not a hunter, but I love to target shoot. And I love the precision of the training. And for me, if I'm going to do something that freaks me out, which is what I like to do a lot of the time, I want to do it with somebody I trust.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to go shooting. I don't want to go rock climbing. I don't want to jump out of a plane with people who are like, nah, maybe I'm high. Maybe I'm like, maybe I check the ropes. I don't know. Like, that's not who I want to do it with.
Have you jumped out of a plane?
Yes.
Of course you have.
Against my free will. No, it was part of this executive training group that I was with the shooting and different it was different events. And the skydiving was I have a huge, huge, huge fear of heights.
Yeah.
Like, that's my number 2. That and snakes are kind of even. And then there's one more, but the heights thing, I thought it was a joke when we all went to do it, and I was like, "Okay, don't think about it, Kate, because like, the more I think about it, the worse it gets." And we were all at this jump place outside of San Diego.
So
Snakes and heights were the
Okay.
key, like, the key one. And then I don't wanna say it. I've jumped out of a plane once, and it was tandem, and I thought when we were getting in the plane, I was like, "Does anybody know that the door's open? Like, are you kidding me?" And, of course, I was the last one in, so everybody's, like, butt to butt, and I had a female jump person who's also named Kate, whatever she's super nice, but the door was right here, and I was like, "Okay, is this a joke?" Because the Navy SEAL who is now passed away was adamant that I was gonna jump out of the plane. I was like, "Is he doing this as a joke?" And I
Like,
thought
you take off and the door is open.
yeah, it was like one of
It's
these
feasible.
roll doors, and I was like, "Does anybody know that this is open?" Like, is no one and then there was this other girl that was so excited that she had some hot guy strapped to her back that was not in our group, and I was like, "She's joking around, like, this is not cool, like, I'm gonna fall out of the plane, and we're not even
Do you
up."
hold on or are you
She
strapped in? Like, how
she's strapped like, I'm strapped to her, and
and then
she
she's strapped to the plane? Like, how do you
I
not
don't know if she was strapped to the plane, honestly, and I
you
was
just had
like,
to
"This is all
trust.
going through my head." So I'm there, and I'm like, the only thing I can adjust because I can't do that is my goggles. They were so tight to my face. There's, like, an imprint for, like, a
Oh,
day.
I would have
So I was
had a
like
panic attack.
and then
Yeah.
she's like, "Kate, it's okay." And then they close the door, and then they're like, "Oh, someone farted. We could open the door." They're like, "We're only at 10,000 feet." I'm like, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god." And so we had to go out because we
No.
were the first ones. I mean, I was ready to, like, lose my mind with the girl facing me. She was all joking around and, like, trying to move, and I was like, "She's gonna knock me out of the plane. This is
And
not
you're like, "I need to breathe,"
I need to
and
breathe. I can handle anybody farting, like, just don't open the door."
yeah.
Because it happens, I guess, with the altitude change, so people kinda laugh about it and think it's funny, and I'm thinking, like, "I'm right next to the door. Don't
I'm
open the door."
not comparing this to jumping out of a plane, but before any kind of events or going on stage, I'm like, "Everyone leave me in a
Leave
room
me
by
alone.
myself."
Yes. Me
Like
too. That's
like
how I am.
yeah.
I need a moment, and that sent me to, like, another level, and when I landed, I was like, "Oh, thank God I'm out of the plane." Like, I really thought I was dying when we first came out of the plane.
Did you do it again?
I haven't, and he was like, "You're going back up." And I'm like, "I'm not going back up." He's like, "You're going back up," because we were supposed to do 2 jumps, and then the best part was, like, I don't know if I manifested it, but the fog came in,
You're
so
like
we couldn't do it.
you manifested that, you're
I
like,
was like,
"Dang."
I was like, "It sucks that the fog rolled in for the next jump," but, yeah, so I would do it again just because I feel like I should do a second time just to be like that's what I feel moves you forward,
Yeah,
and doing it and that's where I say doing it with people that are safe, and it's,
yeah,
people that you trust, and that's how I feel about shooting and hiking and all of these things, Knowles Outward Bound. I love those people, and I feel like every school system should have an Outward Bound because I think it changes the dynamic with people.
yeah. There's 2 things I wanted to ask you about that we talked about, last week, and one is the giver and the taker.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My friends have heard heard this spiel before
Yeah.
of I think we all know when we feel like someone is like always asking for something,
Mhm.
or that you've got friends that are like always there for you. You're like, who's the person when somebody dies who you're gonna reach out to, and vice versa. That's like my giver category of,
Mhm.
and it's obviously a lot of empaths are givers,
Mhm.
and just the innate ability of like you're a giver, like you're a natural giver. And I think givers and takers are a really bad combination
Mm.
because a giver will naturally want to give and a taker will naturally want to take from the giver, which will drain the giver. And I believe the best recipe for a relationship are two givers
Are you saying a relationship and friendship or
in
romantic or
in
anything? Yeah.
every piece because your innate love of giving, which is
Mhm.
I really believe how giving is that I want to give you something to give you something, not to get something in return, which
Yeah.
takes me to the second category of there's the faux giver, there's the ulterior motive giver. Ulterior motive givers are like, I'm only giving so you give me something back. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I bought you lunch, Karena.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, don't you remember? So you're paying for me now. Like that
Yeah.
is an ulterior motive giver. And these aren't
Or
judgments. These are just like categories of just like how people can feel this and trying to find that their group of friends that are really their group of friends. And the faux giver is the person who constantly talks about how they give everything.
mhm.
Like, I'm just giving so many people, I don't understand why it's not coming back. Like
And all of those 3, if you listen to your gut, you can tell.
you
Like,
can,
if someone is
yeah.
like, I don't
Feeling
know.
that, like hearing that, like, wait, is that the person? And look, there are gonna be times in any relationship,
Yeah.
like when my parents passed away, like maybe my capacity for giving may only be 20% right now.
Mhm.
That's where, in a relationship, there's gonna be times like that. That's why it's nice if you've got a giver on that side. There's gonna be, oh, well, maybe they have to take a little more of the giving in this time frame.
Yeah.
And then the taker piece is, of course, they want to be with a giver because if they're always taking, and that's where people can get drained. And my big piece is I have a toxic recovery
Mhm.
protocol that I do with people, and it could be from a narcissist, it could just be a toxic relationship or something that's just not good for you. Because when you come out of that relationship, whether it's a friend or a lover or whatever category it is in, you're drained as a giver.
Yeah.
You're going to be on this heightened, like, I've just left this and I'm not going to do it again. And you see, and I'm sure you have friends like, I'm not going to go down that road. And they're like all poofed up
Mhm.
like this. And then they might meet a true other giver, but it's flagging them of like, they can't be real. I'm not saying you're going to ever miss what's meant for you, but you may make it take longer to get.
Yeah.
So I tell people just take a moment if you can to resettle coming out of that where you've gotten away from that toxic piece because you are heightened of like, I'm not going to do that, which is maybe not really your real true self. It's where you are now after being so like, traumatized from that taker relationship.
Do you with your clients, do you deal with that a lot and helping
Yeah.
people? Yeah.
I'm like, hey, that's not even your true self of being
Yeah.
like that abrupt with people. Like, that's just your immediate reaction. And what's interesting is, I love to give this example because I know we talked about it on
Yeah.
the call about narcissists and kind of,
Yes, the narcissist
I'm,
radar.
I'm definitely a narcissistic radar
Yeah.
person. And I was trying to think of an example that would be really easy for people to spot. And I'm going to use an example that happened to a friend. Um, so let's say you're at your house here,
Mhm.
and you're like, Bobby, I've hired these people to come do some work. And these men are outside painting something. And you're inside, and they seem nice, these guys. And Bobby is not your Bobby. He's Bobby, and we'll call him Bobby X, who is a narcissist.
Okay.
And Bobby comes home, and you walk in, and he walks inside, and he's like, I fired everybody.
And I'd be like, "But why?"
And he's
Uh,
like, because I don't trust them. I don't trust them. When really, let's say you're not even married at the time. He doesn't trust you and it's a control pattern. But he tells you he's firing them because he's like, I'll find somebody else. That is not a helpful, that is a red flag. That is like these guys you've judged, they were fine, everything was fine. And it was a complete like, you hired them. This is
mhm,
your choice. And he just overrode the whole thing and canceled it. That is a massive red flag
mhm,
versus like, hey, Karina, he comes over and is like, I'm not sure that guy kind of gave me a bad, like, that's a conversation. That
mhm.
is someone who is
Right.
caring, but it comes across for someone maybe who doesn't fully know it as, oh my gosh, they're protecting me. Oh,
Mm,
the savior. Oh, look at he's looking out for me. There's a difference of like, I just showed up at work to bring you like lunch and like hey, do you want to come downstairs versus like randomly walking into your office and like checking on you. These are two different energies.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It does. I feel like narcissism is having a moment.
And it
It
is,
is.
it's one of my words that I'm like, I have a pattern recognition and I just
Yeah.
feel like it's overused.
Mhm.
Not everyone is a narcissist. There can be women narcissists, there's men narcissists, but not everyone is a narcissist. And I think people love to use that term when they're upset in the relationship.
Yeah, it kind of became a term like gaslighting and, um
And those terms all become like fire in your like
Yeah.
heart. Ah! Like people freak out. And I'm just like, you know what? It's a reality that's there. But really, I go off of behavior more
Yeah,
than terms
yeah,
because I am not a licensed therapist.
yeah,
And to me, I do patterning of behavior. And I may not know all the terms. I have friends that are therapists and we talk about stuff or we bounce stuff off of each other. And they'll be like, oh, that's this. And I'm like, okay, cool. I recognize the pattern of the behavior.
yeah,
And that's what's important to me because I read energy and
yeah,
that's where it comes into play. And so narcissists, because of my, I'm going to call it heightened amplification energy, feel like they're always trying to prove something near me. You
yeah,
can watch it in real time happen
yeah,
where they're like competing with me almost. And it's a very bizarre thing.
yeah, I know,
Have you experienced
I have been a narcissist magnet. I'm
recovering. I'm
recovering.
retired from it.
But, yeah, no, I totally get it, and, um, I'd been told that my mother was a narcissist. Not It was the last few years of her life when we were in therapy together with a psychiatrist, and we would go together and then separate, and when I was separate, she was like, "You know your mom is a narcissist. Like, she will never be able to truly love you. She loves you, but she'll never be able to show it." And
Yeah. So you can see the patterning.
yeah, so then I
Yeah.
start thinking back of, like, the past and this and never yeah, just so many signs.
That
It's like
trying to like find that love of someone who may not be loving you back
yeah,
in that because it's familiar.
yeah,
And what's interesting about the pattern piece of like what you're describing is we can see why we're doing things. It doesn't mean like when people are throwing out terminology, it doesn't mean everybody has that attachment or everybody has it,
yeah,
it's just a pattern. I recognize people I've dated that I'm like, "Oh gosh, I'm so glad I've moved forward." It just is a looking back at where you were in that time frame.
yeah, absolutely, and now my radar is much better. Bobby's radar has always been really good. And I'm like, "No." But,
But
uh
do you think that they came up to you and could feel your
mhm. Oh,
empathy
yeah.
and your kindness
Mhm.
and you're attractive, obviously, and that's when they were like, "Let me tell you everything."
Let me suck your energy. And
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
literally that's the cord piece. Like
yeah,
that's of course. And I think that's the piece. It's not to make people fearful
yeah.
because to me, let me just blanket statement, walking with fear will open up the gates of that.
Mhm.
And so when people I just say, you know, the non-fear of like, "Oh, am I gonna attract this? Am I gonna attract this?" Can have the opposite effect of calling it in, saying, "Look, I'm protected. I'm okay. I know I can use my own judgment in that space."
Yeah,
And it's a training. People will get used to being able to recognize
yeah,
that pattern
yeah.
and feel it. And really, women especially, and this is because we're, nurturing, will want to not make somebody feel bad. When you feel I was taking a Krav Maga class in New York City from Israeli special forces guys, and they were talking about something which is really interesting. It was all women's like rape, like prevention,
Mhm.
super fun. I was already up on the awareness part because I was like, I already do this. Why are you teaching me this? I
Yeah.
already like that's how I walk around. But the piece was interesting. The example of getting on an elevator. If you're standing on an elevator and you get this creepy feeling that this guy is standing next to you or a woman, are you gonna get on the elevator just so they don't feel bad? Like, if you're like, "Oh, I'm already on here," but you can get off.
Mhm.
Because we're always like, "Are they gonna f are they am I feeling bad? Like, I don't wanna upset anybody." Well, that could
Yeah.
save your life, as he
Mhm.
described it, and that's
Mhm.
true. It's like when somebody won't take no or like, "Let me help you with that bag," and you're like, "No, I'm good," and they're like, "No." And he used the example of like, if somebody tells me no, I'm always gonna say, "Okay."
Yeah,
But that's those are some more like
yeah. Red
judgment,
yeah,
red
red flags.
flag
Yeah,
pieces of like, you're an adult, you hired somebody, and if you want them here, that's your choice. Instead of somebody coming like wiping it out. That's a major control sign.
yeah. So, how do you work with your clients? Like, what's that process?
It it varies depending on since I offer different things, sometimes people wanna talk to me for an entire day, or they want me to come, like, say, "Hey, come with me to work," or "Come with me on my daily activities to feel where you can feel I can make adjustments," or, like, "This is
Yeah.
happening with me at the grocery store," or, "This is what's happening at work. I'm in a toxic environment in work." Maybe
Mhm.
they could bring me to work kind of like, "Hey, this is my friend Kate," and we can assess.
Mhm.
And then we pick up tools along the way that's, like, for them to use.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I just do an energy healing remotely, and some people, that's all they can do, like, I'm not in their area, or they can come to my new place in LA, or I can come to them and do an energy healing. Most of that is with people that wanna have a conversation and do a healing at the same time,
Yeah.
where they may not know where something is blocked in them, or
Mhm.
like, I can't figure out why I can't meet this person, or I'm not moving forward in my job, or we work out pieces of that. We can also go on walks. Since I'm such a movement loving person,
Mhm.
I have a 3-hour one where we can just go for a walk, we can go
Okay.
for a hike.
Yeah.
Whatever you wanna do, we can pretty much do as long as I'm not swimming.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you can't talk when you're
I
swimming,
can't talk when
so
I'm swimming, but, like, we could sit in a hot tub. No,
yeah.
but I mean, it's more of that, I believe, should be part of people's therapy. Is it just
Yeah.
it let
Walk and talk, I love
walking, it's just like a flow,
yeah.
and so for me, that's kind of how it's been working, and I'm open to if somebody, like, wants to do multi-day, or like, "Hey, I don't have time, but I want you to come see me for 1 day, every 2 months," or
Yeah.
because they can fit it in that way. And then we go over so much, and we can also do an energy clearing. Like, I can do a healing and just being with them to feel what's happening to them at the time that it's occurring.
Yeah. I like the take Kate to work day.
I know, isn't it fun? I mean, it's actually really fun because
Yeah.
one of my pieces is that even just in the groups or corporate stuff, I used to joke that I could walk into a high school and tell you who's a bully, who's not. Like, I can feel.
Mhm.
I was like, "What's wrong with these how come people aren't, helping this situation?" And I know that people need to figure out some things on their own, obviously, but, like, in a workplace, one of the pieces of this, yes, like, when you're a high level, high net worth person, there's a lot of people around you that are like, "Oh, yeah, Karena, yes, 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 yes."
Mhm.
But not every I personally like people who tell me, like, "Kate, that doesn't make any sense." Like, I
Yeah.
want you to say that.
Yeah.
I chose people that have helped me along the way that are, like, full on, like, "No," or "This is bullshit," because that's how I think moves you forward. It doesn't always mean I wanna hear it,
Yeah.
but so I'm the person who can tell you who's really got no people working for them in their yes category. Like, that's my tagline is, like, "If you're surrounded by yes people, I can tell you who's really a no."
I like that.
Because, I mean, the Hollywood world, like, the big
Mhm.
corporate world, and there's people. I used to say to my dad, I'm like, "No one's gonna say no to you. Like,
Yeah.
no one's gonna say no to you as a CEO in your position." Like, I just don't see that happening, and so for me, it doesn't mean that this person's bad, let me clarify. It just means maybe they're not swimming in the same direction, and maybe their direction's somewhere else where that's gonna make them reach their peak. It's the same how I talk about when you and I chatted about relationships. People love to be like, "This person was the worst," and maybe they were, and maybe it's 2 amazing people that don't work out. Like,
Yeah.
that's an option too, and I'm not saying that there aren't people that are darker
Mhm.
in the category of darkness of, like, dark versus light, not good, bad necessarily, like, they've picked up some dark energy, but, you know, you can have 2 amazing people that just are not amazing together.
Right. Exactly.
Same
Yeah.
in a company, like, "Hey, there's 6 people in here, Kate, I need you to come assess this, like, something is not working, the communication is off." And then we can either do, like, a group assessment. I can also work specifically with that department. It doesn't need to be the whole company.
Mhm.
It can be a very specific, like, "This department, something's going on in here."
Yeah.
And it's just an energy read. Like, is somebody just having a bad personal thing at home happening? Or is this person the cog in the wheel?
Yeah.
It's just it's a frequency piece to
Uh,
pick up on.
yeah, I think that's a really important thing, especially in corporate or if a founder of a company or CEO, the yes people and
The yeah the yes people, and to me, when you go past that, it's just all energy and
yeah.
frequency, and to me, my passion is making things go more like flow better. And so if you're a big corporation and you're spewing out, let's just say you're making something and it's all going out and there's all this negative energy, it's still negative energy going out, whether you're super successful, but you could even be more successful, or there could just be everybody wants to work for you. How
Yeah.
about that? Like everybody wants to come show up at work.
Yeah.
You're getting great reviews, like everything's amazing. Or how can we take it to the next level instead of like, oh gosh, these people hate us on, or whatever.
Yeah.
Then you're always going to have, I'm sure you're going to always have that. I mean, I definitely know I ruffle feathers and yay.
Well, that's okay. You know?
I'm not going to be the person who's not going to, I don't offer it unless somebody's asking.
Yeah.
That's the key piece. And when that's another like call red flag of like somebody's walking up to you being like, oh, Karena, you can't do this.
Yeah.
Without,
Y
asking.
Yeah.
Unsolicited advice.
Yes. I love that.
I'm sure
I
you've had your fair share of unsolicited
I've
advice.
had plenty, but Bobby and I joke about it because I've had a lot of that, and so sometimes we'll both say, "That was unsolicited advice," to each other.
And I look at it as more of like a universal
Yeah.
rule of, yeah, I may be able to feel things, but unless you're asking me, it's not my time and place to share that. If you hire me, sure, I'll
Yeah.
say, hey, I'm getting this message coming in and I feel like, you know, what do you think of this? It's not like you have to. I'll never say you have to do this. Like
Yeah.
that's your own, everybody's own choice. And my job is to empower people in that space of like trusting their gut. And yes, people will ask me to meet somebody they're interested in or take a
Oh.
look at a photo or, hey, can you tell me, is this you feeling off with this person? Like something's off. Like one of the friends who I won't name, but who I mentioned to you, has left a blanket statement. If I'm ever near him or see something,
Mhm.
tell him that he
Oh.
doesn't catch. And he's a highly decorated military friend. And he's just like, it's not an arrogance, Kate. It's like there's something that goes on in your energy that allows you to see something that I may not see. It's just a frequency. And I think it's that vibration that like causes people to act slightly differently. I joke that I could be like a bomb detector in the
Work for the
airport of like,
FBI.
yeah. And,
Solve
and I mean, my friend who is an agent joked that I could stick you in the glass room and you would know. Yeah, like I probably it's a frequency. Like something happens where I've noticed it's the same way we can talk about the guy in the airport who will make me cry. Um, they want to talk to you or share something, or
Mhm.
they say something that because it maybe it feels safe to them. It's like a safety frequency. Like with some of the military guys will just be like, I have no idea why I just told you that. Like, I have no idea. I've never said that. Like, I don't know why. And once I've had to take ownership of that because it's a disservice if I don't use that in a way to help people because it's been said to me multiple times.
Well, and we've talked about how the military is one of the most isolating places to be and,
Yeah.
one of the a lot of
Top.
suicide.
Yeah.
And so if someone is coming to you because they need to say something and feel comfortable, you're there to listen.
Yeah. And that's the piece where it's like, I'm not and this isn't to scare people, but not every healer or not every person is there for your best interest. And I think that's really
Mhm.
important. And this is where your gut instinct comes in of that's where people don't trust people. It's like, are they gonna take this and use it against me?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I just have to say that's not my intention because karmically that is so gross.
Yeah.
And it's not to make people afraid. It's just to say, hey, sometimes people come to me and say, can you help me find a healer? And it's absolutely.
Yeah.
Or can you help me find a massage therapist? Can you help me find an acupuncturist? Because just like matching people is something too. Like I always say, if we're not a good fit, I know so many people
Yeah.
in that capacity that I would trust. And when it comes to life or death, it's not, it's very serious. And that's the part where I take it very seriously. And you know,
Yeah.
unless you say you're gonna self-harm or harm somebody else, that's where my line is drawn as far as, like, not saying something.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, Kate, where can everyone find you? And we will put it in the show notes
Oh,
as
okay.
well.
My website is insightwithkate.com, and I'm also Insight with Kate on Instagram, and KHH it's KH Hobbs 13 is my personal one on Instagram. And one other thing I want to mention is just like the funny stuff that comes up. Just
Yeah.
so I don't want to end on such a
So
serious note
Uh-oh.
is like my neighbors in San Diego were always like, weird stuff happens when we're with you. Like, what is going
Yeah.
on? And I was telling them about this dog that they hadn't met. Like, we're all dog people. And I'm like, you have to see the neighbor's dog. It's like
Yeah.
this humongous dog. And they're like, okay, Kate, okay, Kate. I'm like, we're standing out on the lawn. And I'm like, you've got to meet Buddy. He's like the best dog ever. He's this massive 150-pound puppy, like Great Pyrenees. And so my phone rang and I was like, let me just take my call. And I was standing on my lawn. And I come back over and I'm like, hey, let's go. We're going to go to the farmer's market. And all of a sudden, this car pulls up. I can see it out of my peripheral. And he's like, is this your dog? And all of a sudden, Buddy comes up by himself, escaped his house. And Callie, the neighbor, is like, what is happening, Kate? I'm like, that's who I was just. She goes, I can't talk about this right now. You just brought the dog over to meet me, like magically. So she's like, just like when you say things, like things are like popping up. And then as we go to the farmer's market, I'm like, oh, gosh, I didn't bring my bag. And she's like, there's this store right here selling bags. Like you can buy a bag. And I was like, okay, what else do I want? And I'm like, let's have Jason Momoa fall out of the sky. Like,
And Jason Momoa showed up.
and I was like,
No, stop.
so, because I was like, okay, it's Christmas. Like, let's have Jason Momoa fall out of the sky. And so we're walking around, we're getting food, and I get a text and I look at my phone and it's Instagram and says, Jason Momoa wants to connect with you on Instagram. And I'm like, Callie, look. And she's like, is this a joke? And so I put it on my Instagram feed. I mean, obviously it's not Jason Momoa, but I was like, this is what she was just like, I can't with you, like near you. And it's just like the funny stuff. Like there's the fun. That's the funny stuff that we like to talk about. And, the magic of funny things coming in.
Well, speaking of dogs, we've got 5 waiting for you and the kitty.
I cannot wait to meet them. And thank you so much for having me on. And it was great. It was so fun.
The big silence. The big silence.